Welcome to Linux Saloon, a place to discuss tech, open source, and where Linux is always on tap. Each show will have a talk about Linux projects such as a Linux distribution, a desktop environment or application. We also chat about the news or any variety of topics from the community. Anything that is Linux tech and open source is on the table for discussion. I'm Nate, Linux fitness and vintage tech enthusiast with an almost unhealthy obsession with the OpenSUSE project, which they had a few problems with their website today. This is the first, OpenSUSE.org was down for a bit, and it came back up. Don't know what happened. I just know that it was down. I got tagged in the Twix social media, Twitter, X, Twix, whatever. So how is everyone tonight?
Excellent.
How
are you?
Good.
Great.
Fantastic.
Having a great night.
Well, with me today, I have Swift, Eric, Joel, Seeker, Penguin Revolution, Eris, Sean, Jinda, Colin, Thomas, Swift again. So there's two Swifts this evening. This is great. And Ben, I am so glad that you're here. Be sure to do the straw poll if you have not done so. The straw poll is to describe your current opinion about AI/machine learning and what your thoughts are on that. If you think we have to welcome our robot overlords sooner than later, and if you're okay with that, I guess. So be sure to do that straw poll. On the docket for today, we have an open mic night. We got quite a few topics in there. We'll have a community free poll. We're going to talk to Ben again about his StormOS. Apparently, he's having an aneurysm. So we're all going to be here for him in spirit. So, but first, what have you been doing in Linux and tech? I forgot to ask if anyone has done anything. Eric, I don't know if there's something exciting, or Joel. Joel, I don't know if you're doing anything exciting.
Nothing particularly.
Right.
Go ahead, Joel. No, go ahead, Joel.
I want to hear from Joel.
I was just going to say I had a quick spin around with the new Ubuntu and can't really report back too much because I only spent an hour or two just playing with it on a free laptop, and honestly really impressed with it. And I'm not sure if 100% along with they're going towards immutability and all that stuff, but as far as the user experience goes, I can't really fault it.
Well, that's fantastic. I think so. This is the immutable one. Is that the new? Are they trying that?
Oh no, just the normal
okay.
Ubuntu 23.10. Whether it's fully immutable or not, I'm not really sure, but I assume that's the way they're going down. And but just the user experience, the installer, bit up times, just the overall experience. Can't really say anything negative about it. So
Was that the new installer, the one based on Flutter or whatever it is? Yeah.
As I'm aware, I think it's the new one. Yeah, it's pretty swish.
So how?
Yeah, they've had some issues with that.
Sorry, Nate. I was actually going to ask, based that right there, how was it compared to the old one? Did you have any issues with it? But Colin basically stole my thunder. So thanks, Colin.
Yeah, I have heard they've had some issues, but I think it was going to be better in this release that Joel's talking about. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So no hang-ups then? We just kind of installed and go off to the races?
Installed, Firefox booted in, I remember back in the day, it was 45 seconds. People were reporting, but it was all fairly snappy, and I didn't really try and install anything too much else. But I don't know. I was just doing a bit of a distro check out this week, and that was just one of the ones that happened to come out in the last couple of days.
Yeah, I feel like we had.
Was snappy a pun?
Yeah, I think it was.
Snappy a pun.
Even if it was unintentional, it was well placed, and I appreciate that. Well, great. Which desktop environment are you using? Is it just the mainline Ubuntu?
Yeah, just
okay.
Whatever they call it now. Yep.
All right. Well, very cool.
It's funny, every time you have an Ubuntu release, on Distro Watch, you've got 10 releases, Budgie, Studio, Kubuntu, all those things. But I think initially I always prefer just to try the vanilla one, and otherwise, the Sway version that is like very third party. I like to see what they've come up with. It gives me some ideas to integrate with my setup.
That's very cool. And so you do like the window manager things? You like those for using?
Generally, I think back in the day, I used to have like a small laptop, and every pixel kind of counted. So, along with not using a mouse too much, it was just instead of having massive title bars and basically unused window space, I was trying to make the most of it. And you kind of get yourself into that mode, then you go back to a 27-inch screen, and it's a whole different kind of conundrum where you do actually want stacking windows potentially, or use of a mouse. So,
right,
best of both worlds.
Yeah, it makes sense. I totally get that. Well, very cool. I think that means we should probably put latest Ubuntu on our list of things to kick the tires on. Probably do like whatever flavor of Ubuntu you want to taste. I think it might be fine.
Yeah, we have someone here that's responsible for a few of them.
Yes. So, is it Rudra? How do you say your name? Like,
Rudra. I pronounce it Rudra. So yeah. Yeah, I maintain Ubuntu Unity. So yep, that's the flavor.
So I have a question for you. So obviously
Sure.
you're deep in the Ubuntu world, Ubuntu land, and so you brought back Unity, which was something that basically had kind of drifted away. 6 years ago now, 5 years ago, and so is it something that maybe did you like start on Unity? I'm like, golly, I really like this. I want to raise this back from the ashes.
Yeah, that basically sums it up. So it was being maintained after 2017 as well. The Unity 7 maintainers team. So that's the team on Launchpad. Launchpad is a platform used by Ubuntu for PPAs and all of that. So there was a tiny little team that got together to maintain the packages and the repos, but it was basically in maintenance mode. So outside of updating dependencies and stuff, didn't see any new features or anything. So I just thought I'd pick it up and start a small little remix using Unity 7, since I used to use Ubuntu 17 or 10 earlier. That was one of the first Linux distros I used. I'm pretty sure I used to use, there was a small little Arch install script and stuff, so that was the first. I gave Ubuntu a try later, and I just thought I'd pick it up and start a remix that would use Unity 7 for that season. So yep.
Yeah, so when I used it last, I often thought that like I kind of wish Ubuntu would just go back to Unity. I don't not to like take that away from you or anything like that, because obviously you're doing a great job with it, and it's nothing against you, but like I was never like a huge Ubuntu fan. I'm still not, like, I don't use Ubuntu that much, but there's something I think that was kind of special about Unity, and I thought it was unfortunate when it was dropped, and there's like so much visceral dislike for it for so many years. I never really understood that. I just didn't, it wasn't my thing.
We have quite a few of those folks. They keep mentioning it's gotten much better now, surprisingly. They hated it when it was out, back then. So that was kind of surprising, the positive reception, considering how many haters there were out there previously. But yeah.
I think you made a lot of people happy, honestly, because they missed it when it was gone. And so, yeah.
I think it was the change from GNOME 2 to Unity, where you couldn't do much with the desktop because it was so restricted when it came to Unity. And I think people got so used to be able to doing their own themes and doing everything they could with the desktop, they could not do anything with Unity. I think that's where the displeasure come from, was that sort of issue there. I think that was maybe the main things. But when you look at the way Unity works, I was wishing I had Unity the other day. I was trying to find something in a menu and I couldn't find it. I think it was in LibreOffice Writer. And with Unity, you've got the heads-up display. You can just search for it. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's pretty handy.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I love Unity. I'm right now using Ubuntu Unity 22.04 right now. And honestly, it's worked great.
Okay, yeah. 2204 was our last release as a remix, before we got promoted to an official flavor. But yeah, honestly, speaking about Unity, yeah. So we are working on porting from Nox, and part of it about customizability. But I just feel in 2020, looking at the desktop situation, with the lack of customizability of GNOME, I mean, it's much worse than Unity was back then, because they don't support most of the protocols now, most of the Wayland protocols. But yep, I feel, it's gone kind of normal now, not to have that much customizability for, new users. Because, I mean, us advanced users, we usually go for window managers and stuff. And we're working on, implementing that in Unity 7 as well. So we're working on making it a bit more customizable. You can swap out components, and we're also working on replacing the old ones like Nox and stuff. And got rid of the dependency on Compass, of course. Pretty much everyone wants to use it. But yeah, we are allowing you to change stuff out now. So yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
It's awesome. Well, thank you very much for one, swinging by and hanging out, and two, for all the work you do to kind of keep the dream alive. I think that's kind of how I'd like to put it.
Yeah,
Anyway.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Yeah, you're always welcome. Eric, you're going to say something, and I cut you off because I'm a big jerk, and I apologize.
No.
Well, I only kind of apologize to you. I'd apologize to anybody else, but probably not so much to you.
It's okay. I understand. No, I had an interesting week. My phone died on like Sunday, I think it was, and I didn't have a spare one around as I normally do, and so I went for 5 days this week without a phone, which was very strange. I haven't not had a phone in, I don't know, well over 10 years. And it's amazing how much of your life, the simplest things, like I couldn't schedule an appointment. I couldn't, look at my reminders to see what I was supposed to do. There were just so many little day-to-day things that I rely on this device to do. It's that when it wasn't there, it was just sort of like, what do I, I was sort of lost for a little bit, but it was actually kind of good to go through it, to sort of just see, like, I had to make several fairly long, trips in the car, and, the prospect of like just being untethered and out in the world. And, it was definitely an interesting experience, and not something that I think I would do on a routine basis, but it was forced unplugging. And yeah, I had a lot of people who were upset with me because they couldn't get a hold of me. They either thought there was something wrong or that I was ignoring them.
You're ghosting them.
And
way to go.
yeah, well, I mean, I had a few that were legitimately angry with me, and I don't know what you want me to do. I'm very sorry. It's nothing personal, but yeah. So that was my week, just without that key piece of technology that I think we all sort of take for granted now, and rely on probably way too much, way more than we should.
I kind of feel like we do. So for me personally, I do a lot of unplugging, like where I don't have any like especially the phone on me. So I don't want to say like I go out and I touch the grass, but basically that's what I'm doing. I'm outside, I'm doing, I'm not paying attention to my phone. So if somebody calls me, whatever, it's in the house. I don't care. I kind of want to get like a landline phone, with like cord and everything, just because.
Yeah.
There's actually
I don't have it next to me.
There's actually, I'm thinking there's actually a way to tether your phone like with Bluetooth to like a like an old pot style phone. And
yeah, I've seen this.
I think I might want to do that with an answering machine and like a tape, like with an actual tape answering machine. I got to find one, just because I want to be that guy.
Listen, it would fit your entire sort of aesthetic. So I mean, it would make perfect sense that you'd have one of those old, gigantic answering machines with the knob, cassette tapes, and the. Oh yeah, and then definitely.
But I'd have to like get a tape that was kind of worn out, or do something to the motor so that had more warble to it, just so it's really bad quality, the playback.
Yes.
Or maybe just generate it and put it on the tape and then whatever. But anyway, there's just something I think about. It'd be a total waste of time. It would not benefit me whatsoever. I just think it'd be neat, as Adam would put it.
Not to sort of dwell on this too much, but it is amazing how much there was that slice of technology from, I was born in 75. And so that sort of 80s era where we got into sort of more miniaturization of technologies, and, a lot of focus on telecommunications and those sorts of industries. And there was a new thing. Seemingly like every 6 to 12 months, there was like some new technology. And things change so much in computers and other technologies, and to think like that was such a tumultuous transitional period. And I feel like things in a lot of ways, I mean, AI is obviously a big hype right now and all of that, but in a lot of senses, I feel like technology has sort of settled to some degree. Like there aren't any huge, massive changes in the way computers are working lately, and smartphones have sort of settled down into what they are. And the internet is sort of a known commodity. It gets a little faster, but that's really sort of the same thing. And but I'm glad to have lived through that period of that amount of change where new and wondrous things were coming out all the time. And I explain as many of them as I can to my daughter, and she thinks I'm making up a lot of it.
Gosh, I've got an 11-year-old. When I explain the 90s technology, she thinks I'm full of crap. So, I mean,
yeah, exactly.
So, actually makes me think, and this is a total derailment from any of the whole of this entire show, but think about somebody who was born in the 1920s or 30s, that went from basically horse and buggy was still a thing to us landing on the moon, or if you want to think that they faked it in a soundstage, whatever. But the idea that we went out into space, that transition, I think was way more rapid, way more disruptive potentially than the computer, like the information age starting in the 1970s. Because if you think about it, from like 1920s previous, horse and buggy and steam locomotive was basically it for a long time. Actually, steam locomotive maybe not quite as long, but before that, for quite a long time. And so to go from that change to us flying and going on the moon and the information, that to me is rapid progress as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah,
no doubt. And here we are with the luxury of people from all around the world and face to face in a meeting. Like it's explaining this to someone who lived not that long ago, it would have been some sort of a, miraculous.
Star Trek.
Yeah, exactly. So far into the future, like they couldn't even imagine it. And it's so casual to us now.
So how long before all holograms, like there's a hologram thing where we can actually look at each other, like a la Star Wars? That'd be pretty cool.
Well, that's after the metaverse. So we're going to do the metaverse first, and then we're going to do holograms.
Yeah, I'm not
sure. I want a hologram Christmas tree. I want a hologram Christmas tree so you can just put it on the floor and go bang, done.
How are you supposed to hang ornaments on it though? You have to have like VR glasses or something like that, right?
I would just. I don't know. I might be showing my age here, but I do remember the horse and cart delivering milk when I was about 5 years old. The horses used to come up the street. Used to wake you up in the morning, deliver the milk.
Clap, clap, clap. Well, I mean, there's still horse and buggy around me too. I mean, we have the Amish communities.
Is there really?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Not like real close to me, but like I'd say probably like 40 minutes from me. There's a pretty large Amish community, and they're all horse and buggy. They don't. Actually, it's really strange. Because I don't fully understand like what technology they can accept or not accept, because like some
they don't use any technology, do they?
No, some of them do. Yeah,
they can use pickup trucks for like work.
Oh, really?
But they can't use it for like home stuff, so it can only be used for
And it also depends on what order they belong to as well. I mean, like a lot of the older orders, they won't even allow you to pick up a phone in your neighbor's house. And then some of the newer ones will allow you to own a pickup truck as long as it's not parked in front of your house. It's kind of strange. So
we have where I live is sort of like the winter vacation area for a lot of the different sects, and you'll see some that are very sort of Luddite, no technology whatsoever, and then some, like you'll see a young girl in a long flowing dress and a bonnet on a cell phone, and you're like, that's a bit of a juxtaposition there. But so it's some of them, I think some of them are pretty pragmatic about needing to be employed and earn money to pay for things. And so I think it's probably, there's a certain segment of each group that is allowed to do certain things in order to, do that. And then, but very, very interesting to take my daughter to the playground and all the little kids are in, their garb and she's the little English girl. That's what they were calling
English
her.
girl.
I was like,
That's funny.
okay.
Yeah, that's what the Amish call everybody else is the English.
The Yank.
No, just English. Like,
yep.
And they would talk in whatever, that sort of German. It's not
Pennsylvania Dutch.
Yeah, it's not a clean like German. It's a amalgam. Anyway, this has gone in a really weird direction.
It has.
So.
And that's probably a good reason to move on to Eris, who so painstakingly puts together these fantastic straw polls for us. And Eris, I don't know if you want to take it away from here or what, but thank you very much for all the work you do.
I believe many of the Amish people use computers in their businesses.
That could be, yeah. I don't know. I'm not here to say what they probably use Linux, I bet, or DOS. I don't know. They can only use Linux, but they can only use the terminal. So
there was actually a computer that was advertised to Amish people, came running Linux, no package manager.
So they only Gentoo.
Oh boy. Okay, so I'm gonna refresh one last time. The question is, which best describes your current opinion about AI and machine learning? And the number one answer was, I think it's interesting, with 53% of the vote. Then it's, I am tired of hearing about it, with 21% of the vote. And then 6% of the vote got, I like the technology. 6% is, I'm scared of that by that technology. 3% is, I love the technology. 3% is, I don't know enough about it. 3% is, I am indifferent towards it. And 3% is other. And the last one was 3% Tux Penguin. Nobody said I don't like it. Nobody said I'm bored by it. Nobody says I hate the technology. And the responses that I got was, for other was, while I think it's interesting, I think it's overhyped. 90% of the things that companies and people are trying to wedge it into are not going to benefit from the technology. Sort of like Bluetooth enabled power tools and most smart home appliances. The technology is unnecessary for most normal use cases, and the public is not going to pay a premium for the enhanced product. Give it a year or two for the hype to fade, and then we'll start seeing some actual interesting applications that make sense. And then the other reply I got was, interesting to be sure, but it's annoying that getting into it as a Linux AMD user is so much more complicated than as an NVIDIA Windows user.
You have to understand how prompts work. You have to understand all the different settings, and it takes a lot of experimentation to sort of get it to be what you want it to be. And even then, it can be difficult to get the thing to do exactly what you want it to do. Like it's unpredictable. So, but that's today, 6 months from now, 2 years from now, it's going to be completely different. I don't think it's the end of creative pursuits. I don't think it's the end of a lot of different professions. I don't think it's the end of writing. I don't know if any of you have been using like Bing search or Bard. I was using them just to test them out, right? Just to see. And while I really appreciate the narrative response to a query, more so than just a series of links that I then have to filter through, what I've found is that it is frequently 100% incorrect in what it's telling you. It looks good, it's well formatted, but like it was telling me very wrong things about, I was researching phones just to see, and it was just completely wrong with facts about battery sizes, screen sizes, all of the facts and figures were just wrong, dead flat wrong. And it was just like, you just can't trust it at all. So
Well, it's a garbage in, garbage out method, idea.
Right.
If there's a bunch of garbage out there on the internet, it's assuming the garbage is true. It's not rating it, and then it spits out garbage. So,
How do you fact check? Whenever you gave it such a huge corpus, like I think there was probably some amount of shaping of that data as it went in, but I think a lot of it, there's no way you could vet it all. And so I think there's going to be just a lot of places where it just doesn't know what true is.
Right.
And so anyway, long story short, I feel like it shows great promise for very specific things. I don't trust that it's not intelligence by any stretch of the imagination. So all of the, hand wringing about like, oh, it's going to take over. Like it's absolutely not even remotely close to anything, approaching intelligence. It's a tool, and it's a really cool tool. Mm-hmm. And I think it has its uses, but we will see much greater,
sure,
capabilities soon enough. So.
And I think, for sure it's a tool. And I think that, but it doesn't matter if it's AI generated or even from people. Sometimes people get things wrong, and then people, so I mean, you can be wrong, and that's okay. I just think it's important to look at all the information very carefully and with discernment and say, is it correct? Yes or no? Maybe it's always go from the idea that nothing is 100% true. Maybe I'm not saying it should, but then always be like, there could be some other information that is contradictory. So, depending on the subject.
The danger I see specifically around something like Bing is that they're giving you what appears to be evidence to support the content that's been given to you, right?
Right.
You've got these sort of links you can click through and stuff like that. If you actually click through to the links, you'll see that it's wrong. But how many people are actually going to do that? So anyway, I feel like everybody understands at this point that every company that can is just shoving it into every corner of their business that they think it could help. And I think the hindsight on this is going to be really cool in a couple of years when we look back and go, oh, that's right, they thought it was going to do that, or but for now,
I think some.
You think what?
Sorry, I think some advantages with this is like there's a lot of people that I've come across in the world that in my lifetime that they don't know how to make speeches, or they've taken on some responsibility. Like you might be a best man at a wedding, or you might be within a business and you've been given the job of making a speech. I mean, all those scenarios could be good for people to get the AI to write them a speech, and they might be able to, make it personalized towards the speech that they want to do. I mean, little things like that could be really, really handy for some people, I must say. So they're the advantages that I can see that it can be used for. There's a lot of negatives, but I think there's good positives as well for, some people. Some people just don't know how to make speeches, and they don't know how to write them, It's just reality, isn't it, really?
Well, yeah, and then there's also the stable diffusion that we've been messing around with. That now that even though it's down right now, but that was actually some amazing AI generated art that was doing. And as far as I'm concerned, AI is fine as long as we don't make Vicky, Vicky from iRobot. Take over the world type of AI, but that's about my opinion on it. It's interesting, but right now, should you trust it to do everything? No.
Yeah, I think that like any tool, it can be used for good, it can be used for bad, so just be mindful of that. The tool itself
I think it's interesting that one of the aspects of the writer strike was that they were concerned that studios would have AI make the first pass at, say, like a screenplay or something, and then that the writers would be called in to then fix it because of course it wasn't going to be anything that you could really use. And then that puts them in a position where the way that they're reimbursed, it makes it so that they're not, being paid properly for the work that they're having to do, because essentially we're going to have to rewrite it. But to Colin's point, I have used it for some web design stuff where it's like I needed a headline or a blurb or something where it was kind of like, how do I combine these 15 words into something that's interesting? And you plug it in and then it gives you back 10 combinations and you're like, okay, yeah, cool, that works. So there are situations like that, but a long form paper where yesterday I was looking for cases for my phone because, it's a whole thing. But I swear some of those articles were just AI spitting out garbage. Like there's no way a human being sat there. No, first of all, there was no sort of real evidential speak, like where it was like, well, this is a good case because of this specific reason. It was very much about just whatever the marketing speak that the company came up with, and very low effort. If it was a human being, it was pretty bad, because these were like not unheard of sources. Like these were tech journals and stuff like that. So anyway, I think that's the potential, is that we already have a glut of either bad information or just pretty useless information. And I could just see this becoming like just spewing, junk out onto the internet just to sort of somehow drive traffic. Or, Nate, you have a blog where you get paid for the advertising. And I think
not much, but yes.
Well, but if let's say you had a farm of these sites that were just clickbait, and you just could, pump out article after article after article, just enough to get, it doesn't matter if the person is there and they get the impression, they get the ad view, and it doesn't have to be quality. It just has to get the eyeball to the page. So anyway, I just think there's a motivation there to pump out garbage content even more than there was before. So
I think some of that stuff, and I could be way off on this because I've been wrong many times, but I think some of that stuff is probably going to chill out, especially as ad revenue, ad revenue's been dropping for everybody, and so it seems like we'll see that maybe like a lot of people like do like something like that to try and generate more ad revenue, but then it's going to just be noise, and people are just not going to click on those things or go to those things, and they're going to like search for specifically what they want, or they're going to find real people. Essentially, people they'll find the diamonds in the rough, as it were. And this already, I mean, even before AI, there's tons of just garbage out there. So, and you just have to recognize it. So, I mean, I guess it gets more skillful about what you actually read as being factual or not. I mean, like the Arch Wiki, great place to get a lot of information that's very good, but not all the information is relevant. So you have to comb through it, make it work for your case, which I do that I do that a lot, actually. I comb through, how do you get this to work? And so 10% of it's actually relevant for my use case, but they have all the use cases on there. So there's things like that. So anyway, and then I read an article on that. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what comes of all of this. I guess I just don't worry, because I'm not wired like that. So
there have been so many disruptive technologies throughout the years that this is just yet another one. Yes, it seems so big and so disruptive in the moment, but it's probably not nearly as big as we think it is. So.
Yeah, I mean, Hollywood could fake anything for a long time now. I mean, even like was it War of the Worlds, and the radio show where people actually like really freaked out because of a broadcast. It was a story. Yeah. But I mean, so this is not a new problem. This is a problem that's happened before. So, you just have to know what to trust and what not to trust, I guess. Well, very cool. It was a fun discussion. Wish I would have missed all of it, due to my internet taking a dump on me. But hey, there you go. I need to do something to fix that.
You need Starlink.
Well, there's something else I'm looking at too. So I guess Verizon has these little internet boxes too that have plugs on it, like Ethernet plugs. And a buddy of mine, he got one. He spends like $45 a month on it, which is less when I'm paying for my internet now. But I have an actual dish that connects up, and Verizon says it's not available here, but I wonder if I can probably fake it. And all I really need is just some sort of a failover. If I can bond the the wide area network connections. I have the hardware now where I can do that. It's just a matter of getting it all set up properly. I might have to do that at some point in time here because this is like third week in a row. What did happen last week?
Yeah.
But like
I've noticed that you've been having
it's at about 8:30 every Saturday. When it happens, something resets somewhere and it's causing me to lose connection. So it'd be nice to have a backup.
I think he switched with Eric. Eric had that problem, remember?
Oh yeah, that's right.
I still do. 8 p.m. It happened tonight too. It always happens, but that's my hardware. But my dad actually just told me about one of his friends has the T-Mobile version of that, and he says that like his whole family uses it and they don't saturate the connection. And I just think that mobile bandwidth has gotten very capable. I would think that I'd be curious to see if you would ever have dropouts though, like if it was a 100% reliable, steady stream, or if there were sort of small interruptions that might give you problems. But
if I have two different, so like I'm right now connected
like
to AT&T.
failing over, kind of thing. Yeah.
So I have AT&T right now. That's who I'm connected to, up into. I can switch to T-Mobile, but that actually was connected to that last year, but they pushed it over to AT&T because it's better for where I'm located right now. But so I'd like to maybe use a different provider, which would be Verizon. I have that on my phone, so that seems to be pretty reliable here. But Verizon doesn't say they offer. But I don't need to have great connection. I mean, basically what I need is 3 megabits per second upload is what I need to be able to sustain the stream.
Yeah.
So 4 preferably, and then that's fine. But anyway,
you just need a really long cable. That's what you need. So
1,000 feet that way.
Yeah.
There is Comcast. That's like 2,000 feet that way is Comcast. But they don't come right here. And not that I want Scamcast anyway, but hey, there we are.
Yeah.
Anyway, not a big deal.
Comcastic.
It's Scamcastic. Although if Comcast wants to sponsor this podcast, I'd definitely change my tune in a heartbeat, right?
You would.
No, I wouldn't.
And none of us would blame you.
No, for other reasons, I wouldn't. Well, it is an open mic night, and I would have very quickly put down how long I've been streaming, but that's no longer accurate because I had to reset that. So, I had a suggestion from someone. I got an email from Advait. I don't know how to say his name exactly, but he had a topic idea: pros and cons of putting the home directory on a separate drive. He's talking about desktop Linux for the average home user like himself. So not servers or home labs or fancy complicated setups. So right now, his home directory is on the system drive, and he's got 2 NVMe slots on his Ubuntu laptop, and he's thinking about switching to having his home directory on a separate drive. This way he can nuke and pave his system drive without worrying about any system files. He doesn't use a NAS or anything like that, so I do daily backups.
Yeah.
Of all user files.
The beauty of Linux is such that, and actually before the advent of these larger drives that we all use today, it was very common to have home be a completely separate disk, and you'd have multiple, all of those sort of partitions would be pointing elsewhere because there just wasn't enough space on one single disk, or they were so unreliable you would never want to put all of your eggs in one basket, so to speak. I still do a hybrid approach to this. So I don't keep I keep all of my data components, so my desktop documents, videos, music, so all of those folders are actually on a different disk. And I just use links, soft links from my home directory over to that. And so my home directory is actually full of, folders with the little arrow on it. But then I have the home directory itself is still on the system disk. The reason I do that is because I used to do exactly that, where I would have my entire home directory on a separate disk, and then I would dual boot or multi-boot using that same directory. What I found was it was a huge mess let's say I had GNOME on one partition and, was booting into Ubuntu, let's say, and then on another, boot that I had was, Mate or, Plasma or something like that. Because they are using different configurations, I mean, some of it they share, right? So there is some commonality between desktop environments and even distributions, but then some of it is separate and disparate depending on the desktop environment and the distros that you're using. And it just turned into a really nasty mess after a while, where I would be overwriting configurations for the components that were shared, and that would cause problems because one was sort of conflicting with the other. So it depends on what your use case is. For me, that just wasn't, it didn't work well for me. So that's why I took this hybrid approach where all of my data is on a separate disk so that I can easily access that data between distributions, but each distribution has its own dedicated home folder, if you will, so that all of the configuration stuff for that distro is contained and separate from another distro.
So for me, I actually went from having a separate partition for home to now I just combine it all. And this is like something I did more recently. So, because it was just easier to manage, especially with the way ButterFS handles files. It was just, I like the flexibility of just keeping everything all together as opposed to separating it. But I can't speak for an Ubuntu setup, but I know in OpenSUSE it's really easy in YAS just to point and click and change your drive configurations however you would like. So my advice would be real easy, but it's not a real complicated process to migrate your data over and then create, and actually some people just say, I just saw a bunch of like, I symlink my home directory or my Steam directory or whatever on their computer from another drive. But it's actually very easy. You could probably do it all point and click. I'm pretty confident you could do that. That shouldn't be a problem. But now I'm curious now for the panel that's here, who has a separate partition or drive for home? Thomas, your hand is raised. So is that a yes, I do, or is that I have some advice?
Both. So I have a separate drive for my home. It's actually a RAID 10. And it used to be that what I would suggest people do is you could get a smaller, faster drive for your root directory, and then a larger, slower drive for your home directory. So you could have like a fast, 128 gig NVMe drive for your root directory, and then a 1 terabyte HDD for your home. The home wouldn't be slowed down by the operating system, and you don't spend a fortune getting a large 1 terabyte NVMe drive. But nowadays, SSDs have come so far down in costs and up in reliability, you can do OneDrive. In my case, it's actually really nice because I need the high performance because I'm generating ISOs all the time and building kernels and things like that. So I need to be able to write to my home directory really, really fast. But I also need the data redundancy because if that drive fails, then I, at least this way, won't lose any data.
Right.
At least not immediately. For other people, they don't need anything nearly as exotic as what I have, of course. But it definitely makes it so that you can have some data security, at least. So if you're a distro hopper, for instance, it's probably the way you want to go to have a separate drive altogether for your home, especially having a separate drive altogether for each operating system. That way you can just tell the installer, wipe the whole drive and install it. This whole drive is for you. And you're not worried about it nuking another operating system. You're not worried about it nuking your data. Mm-hmm. You just let it do its thing, because that whole process is much simpler than telling it, okay, I want you to install your root directory into this partition and use this pre-set up partition as your home directory. Instead, I just want you to nuke this whole drive. That is your root drive, and use this other drive as your home directory. It is much faster, much easier, much less error prone in general, especially if you're trying out new smaller distros that have to use their own installer, like with DragaOS once upon a time.
That makes sense. Thank you, Thomas. Rudra, what did you have to say about that? Because you're a developer, so you do a lot of things.
Yeah, so I have several distributions on one just have 4.5 Ubuntu Unity and all of them. So I just bind mount I do not have the main home directory on a different disk. To be precise, I have documents and all of those. I have all of those directories on one disk, so not .config or all of that might be specific to one. That might be specific to one config. I just have documents, downloads, and all of those directories, bind mounted on multiple installations, so that I can easily transfer files and all of that between them. So yeah, I just bind mount a few particular directories. So it's kind of similar to Eric's setup, except I'm not using sitlinks, I'm not using soft links. And yeah, I agree with Thomas. So I have my download section on my hard disk, for example, and documents on the sponsor NVMe disk, and yeah, I have all of them bind mounted because I need the performance, of course, as Thomas said. For shifts and stuff and all of that, you need fastest performance for that. So yep, that's what I have.
That's very cool. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, probably the way you would operate to do the different things that you like to do with systems is probably vastly different than how I like to operate, just based on your workloads. So that's very interesting, and I'd love to hear more about that in the future too. I'd like to just compare notes. So Sean, you had your hand raised. How do you do the thing? The thing.
Yeah. So I also have a separate drive for my home partition. I've been using Nix for the last 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
And it's worked out well, and swapping between different desktop environments hasn't been a problem. But my main desktop environment at this point is Cinnamon. So that's using a bit of an older technology. So it doesn't really conflict with any of the current GNOME settings that I found. So there isn't an overriding issue that I've run into. So I guess I don't use desktop environments that are similar enough that I run into problems with configurations getting clobbered.
Right. So that makes sense. And would you say you have any? So you actually obviously you've worked out a system that works best for you, for how you manage your operating system and your data and everything else. How long did it take you to get to the point where you're really happy with it?
I wouldn't say I'm totally happy with anything at any particular time.
Of course.
But
reasonably happy. How's that?
I used Ubuntu for my main operating system. I was a Ubuntu budgie user for a long time. And then in the last year or so, I started to do another revamp and distro hopping. So the last year has been kind of like going from distro to distro. And I finally landed on NixOS, and then I settled down. So
I gotcha. So something about NixOS just worked well with the way you think.
I generally like the way that I can configure everything through a set of configuration files and just be done with it, and not have to worry about it. It's all in one place. I don't have to go searching for a specific file. I know where they all are. So
makes sense. So you're continuing to work toward that happiness goal ultimately, that you probably never get 100% because something will change in what you want. Yeah. So it's like the carrot in front of the pig thing that you're writing, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I get closer, but I mean, there's always something.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get it.
Could be a little bit better. So
cool. Penguin or Alan, whatever it be called.
I don't care really, but the
Palin.
Yeah, Alan's fine. That's fine.
Penguin, Alan. I'm just trying to work it out. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
All right. Well, it all depends on what kind of hardware setup I have. If I have a laptop with just a single drive in it, I really don't bother separating out the partitions. I don't think that really has an advantage. But if you have like a desktop computer with multiple drives, I definitely take that home directory and separate it off on its own drive, simply because I do a lot of tinkering, and if I screw something up, all I have to do is wipe out the boot drive, then go and reinstall the operating system, point the operating system to the home directory, to the home drive, and I have all my data and all my configurations right there. I don't have to go and set everything back up again. It's like I never wiped the drive except for reinstalling the programs I need. So that's pretty much how I set everything up. Is if I have multiple drives, the home drive goes on its own drive. But if I have a single drive, I just put it as a directory on my boot drive.
I got you. That makes sense. I guess when you have laptops tend to have fewer storage options than a desktop would have. Colin, I see that yellow hand raised.
Yes, this is one of my favourite conversations, I must say. I sort of struggled with this over the years as well. I did a video on bind mounts that we spoke about. I think it was Linux Saloon or maybe before that. I'm trying to install my custom Arch distro at the moment. So this is my data drive that was in my NUC. So now I've got two different system drives. So I'm just plugging this in with USB, which works just as fast now. And I don't need to worry about anything because all my data's on here. I can plug that back in once I get my whatever system I decide to rest on. But yeah, I agree totally with what Eric was saying. If you're messing with different desktop environments, do not use a separate home drive because, yeah, it just gets ugly. I suppose if you use an XFCE, you might be okay because that doesn't change too much. And if you're using the same XFCE and just updating, you might be still okay using a home drive. But a separate drive is the best to go, I believe. And I just symlink all the home folders. So that's a relatively easy thing to do these days, to symlink all your home folders, your pictures, your videos and all that to your separate data drive. And that works really well. The one thing I did do is I use free file sync to mirror everything in my data drive to another external drive. And the only thing I don't do is if I'm downloading ISOs, I put that in my home folder. So I don't have to worry about all those ISOs taking up all the space. I'm only happy to have them on my home folder. I don't need to back up ISOs because quite often you're deleting them, you're updating them or whatever. So, you don't really need to do that. So that way it doesn't actually take forever to sync all those ISOs. So that's the change that I've made there. But separate home drive, definitely separate drive and just symlink, I think, is the best way to go. And you can, if you want to change your system, it doesn't matter what system you're using, whether it be a different desktop environment, a different base, you can just install it, put your symlinks in place, you're up and running. That's how I've been doing mine for the longest of time. So that would be the best advice I could give. That's if you've got if you're in a situation where you can have a separate home, different data drive. Some people don't have that situation, so you'd have to make a different data partition, and you can still use a different. You can still install different desktop environments and different bases with a separate partition on the same drive. You can still do it that way if you don't have the ability to use a different drive. I hope that makes sense, but
Yeah.
that's how I've been doing it in the past. Yeah,
that makes sense. So when the desktop I'm using right now, I'm gonna call it that. I started out with just one drive in it, and so I had Btrfs on it, and then I made some changes, and I added another drive to it. So the main drive is NVMe. Then I added a SATA drive to it, and then I built an external storage, and so I put like an external like media device, and then I added storage in that as well. So I have 3 drives connected to it, but I didn't move my home. I left it just where it was, and then I used the other drives as like, kind of like junk storage. I don't want to say junk storage because so all the stuff from like OBS, so the recording that I do, it doesn't go on my main drive. It goes on one of the other drives. So any of my like project stuff that I don't want synchronizing between my other machines, it's all over there. And if those blow up, it's actually not a big deal because I've either extracted what I needed out of them, and the chance of me actually going back to it is pretty low. So it's not really critical data, if that makes any sense. And then yeah, so that's how I kind of manage that. But I don't so I do pretty much since I went all in on Btrfs a few years ago, I've pretty much been my server that actually has a separate home partition, but that's actually my RAID. I bootstrap the device with just in a non-RAID, and then all my data is in a RAID 10, kind of like Thomas. And those are all spinning Rust, so they're cheaper, and I could get a lot more. At the time, I thought it was pretty huge, 5.5 terabytes, but now it's almost all chomped up now with media and backups and everything else. So I guess I gotta do something there. But anyway, that's how I do it. And then everything for me for backups, I have multiple machines that everything synchronizes. So all my documents, any of my critical documents, are all backed up actively between machines. I guess it's not really technically a backup. I guess technically, but if any one machine blows up, I have a backup. So that's how I look at it, and they're all restorable. So I don't know, Joel. How do you run things in your world? Are you separate home partition, or do you keep it all on one?
I have to admit, like, I don't really keep track of a lot of that stuff. I know that sounds a bit funny.
No, that's right.
Just on any installer, I just do the defaults. Generally don't use like encryption, all that kind of stuff. I've just found that I think I had a bad experience a few years ago where I kind of locked myself out of my own data. So I kind of
Yep.
It wasn't a ton of data, but just data nonetheless. And if you lock it away and throw away the key, it's a lesson learned. So at the moment, I'm just using the default stuff on FreeBSD, which I believe is ZFS, and I'm using this file system that probably has so much more power that I'm using from it. But I just click through tap through the installer, and I think it's all on like separate. I'm not sure if you call it partition or Z-pools, I think, in FreeBSD, but yeah, honestly, whatever the default is, that's the way I go.
Yeah, that's. I've been bit in the butt by encryption once, and that was like 10 years ago, and so I just haven't touched it since. And I think that's just where I'm going to stay right now, because if somebody really wants my data that badly, that's fine. I have
certain things like I was going to say. There's certain things like personal stuff I'll encrypt. In different ways, but as far as my Etsy directory or anything like that, system stuff that just can be re-downloaded from the internet, like I'm not going to either back it up or otherwise worry if that's encrypted at all. It's generally stuff that I don't touch anyway.
Right. Yeah. I use a KD vaults or KD vaults, whatever they're called. So if there's something like I do want to keep locked up, I can very easily do that. You drag it in there, and you can. So it's not always active. I think it's actually a safer way of doing it because it doesn't unlock itself when I boot up the computer. It's only when I want it. Only when I want to activate that vault do I have access to that vault, and then it closes that vault up. So I don't know if it's really that much more secure than any other method, but that's the method I use. Sean.
Yeah, so I encrypt everything. I'm the guy who's like, yes, go ahead and do the full disencryption. in the installer. Maybe I just have trust issues. I don't know, but somebody can get a hold of my laptop. Somebody can get a hold of my backup drive if they came into my house, etc. So yeah, so I just encrypt everything. I have not had a problem with it. I know that password by heart at this point, so and it's long enough that you'd really have to like be working at it for a while before
right.
you'd stumble across it by accident. So
yeah, it looks like so I think Barco, he seems like he's a little upset with me. Maybe he's not, but he says I encrypt everything, never a problem. So yeah, I guess maybe there's something wrong with the way I use my computer. I think that's just what it boils down to. And I
think it's just a mindset issue where it's like, do I trust the encryption or do I trust other people? And
Yeah,
I
I mean,
trust the
have
encryption.
FTE.
So
I have FTE on my laptop and all of that, but yeah, I mean, you can't really have encryption with that sort of complicated setup, with sort of band mounts and all of that. So I just have it on the laptop, trust issues and all of that. So yep.
I think like if I were to travel to some countries, I just wouldn't take my laptop with me. And then have basically, if I really needed something encrypted, I'd have a specific system for traveling as such. But like, I'm not terribly like, if somebody actually has access to my machine and they want to get to my data, they're that desperate to get to it, they will get to it no matter what. It's just a matter of time and how much effort they want to put into it, I would think. I haven't heard from Jinda on this topic. I know, sorry, Penguin, but I just want to hear from Jinda on this. What does he do with his home partitions? Do you have that?
Actually, I usually just back it up on a separate hard drive, and then I take it out and stick it somewhere away from the computer. For I don't kill it.
Do you run?
I do it once a month.
Oh. Probably more than most. Do you have like a separate home partition or home drive from your system partition, or is it all one?
No, it's all one.
Okay. Interesting. Penguin.
Well, as far as encryption goes, I usually only encrypt my external backup drive, and that's where I have all the sensitive data that I have on it. As far as laptop drives, internal hard drives, no. I find it more trouble than it's worth just to do that, as long as I keep all my sensitive data on that hard drive, on that external hard drive. I don't see a need to encrypt your internal hard drive.
Okay.
Really.
Hey, Rudra, you're going to say something.
Yeah. I often find myself using my laptop, leaving it in places. So, I mean, that's why I found FTE handy on basically all of my laptops. So, I lost it to the hotel staff once, and got it back a day later and stuff like that. So, I have FTE, just in case something
right.
bad happens. So,
right. Yeah, it's something to think about there. I wonder if there's a way to like do like a remote self-destruct, like if you had a way, like if your machine connects to the network and it knows, and you've somehow signaled that you are lost, you can have it like destroy the data. One of those things. Like with Tailscale, you can like revoke Tailscale certificates. I wonder if you could make an automation that if this Tailscale certificate has been revoked, that it would run a script to basically wipe itself out. That might be kind of fun. I don't know. I would be.
Yeah, I mean,
I would be a little worried that I would accidentally wipe something.
Same, yeah. I mean, there was a distro. I remember there being a distro that would, wipe your disk. This would wipe your disk if you made a single typo, while that command. If any command gave an error, if any command if any command had a return code other than 0, if it just self-destruct. And
yeah,
I remember
like
there being
rat
a
poison or something like that.
for that.
It's called like rat poison or something. There's some some distribution. If you make one mistake, it destroys everything. Yeah, I think that's funny.
Yeah, that was tough one. So, yeah, I probably wouldn't consider that on network stuff, on all of this on production stuff. So, yeah, I'll probably, don't know, honestly.
That's interesting. Well, cool. I don't know if anybody else had anything else they wanted to say on the subject. Seeker.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was getting to the the mute button. I actually don't really move my partitions around, or I just keep it in a simple home directory. I don't move it around. That's just all I'd say. That I just don't participate in that little part. That I don't really move it around myself. I just keep it in the same home directory. That's all. Simple enough.
Gotcha. Ben, do you use a separate home partition, or is it all in one pot?
It's all in one for me. I do have 2 SSDs on this laptop, but I have a dual boot on this system, so I just I don't got the space for separate home space, unfortunately.
I gotcha. Cool. I don't know if Eris or Swift had anything want to throw in on that.
So I prefer to keep it simple.
Uh-huh.
I just install the OS and I don't have anything separate. It's all in one.
Okay. I know that's been the default for Ubuntu for a while. And Eris, I think he runs Gen 2. So how do you set up your or is it Slackware? I can't remember what Eris runs.
I'm running Ubuntu.
Oh, okay. I was just trolling.
I usually just keep it simple, and maybe I do have sometimes a separate partition for data, and everything else in one partition.
And then in Ubuntu, if you wanted to move or like add a partition or add a separate drive, is there a tool in Ubuntu to do that from a graphical tool perspective? So I think that's what Advent is really asking.
What? Repeat the question again.
So is there a graphical tool for managing partitions? I think Gparted. Probably Gparted.
Yeah, I mean, you have Gparted, but as part of the installer, I'm not sure about the new Flutter-based one, but Ubuntu doesn't have one, that's for sure. It doesn't support having partitions and multiple disks for activities and stuff.
No.
So.
But as far as Ubuntu goes, it's just Gparted and known disks.
Yeah, you just have
That's
to
about it.
set and stuff.
Yeah. So they don't have their own tool for that.
Yeah, they don't need their own tool. I think that writes to FSTAB as well, I believe. So if you want something to mount on boot, I think it'll do that.
Yeah.
Pretty sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it will.
So there's your answer, Advait. I think I've been saying your name different every time. One of them is correct, I'm sure. But if you want to move your home partition out of your main directory into a different drive, can be done. Gparted is one way, GNOME Disk is another, and you can have it mount automatically. I think there's some flags you can set on that, so it'll mount on boot. Write it to the FSTAB, Etsy FSTAB, or is it Etsy? Is that how you're supposed to say it? ETC, etc. Maybe, I don't know. How do you want to call it?
I don't know.
Doesn't matter.
I don't think there's a wrong way.
Yeah.
And it's technically
It's
FSTAB or whatever, but I always pronounce it FSTAB as well.
Same, yeah.
Same with USR or user / whatever.
Yeah, someone like admonished me for saying user once. I'm like, oh, it's not? Okay. All right. Well, it was close.
It's whatever you want to call it, I believe.
Yeah, it is. It's just like everyone else calls it Linux, but if you talk to Richard Stallman, he's going to yell at you and say it's GNU Linux.
That might be a little different.
Yeah.
Right. So I have
setting up a smaller blog.
What's that? Go ahead.
Nothing. No, I was just setting a small little blog about that. So yeah. Right now, just setting a small little one about that. Yep.
So I came upon I should say I got an email in my cubiclenate.com, and there was the Federal Trade Commission versus Epic Games. Has anybody seen this lawsuit that's going on or whatever? So in a nutshell, the Federal Trade Commission recently reached a settlement with Epic Games, the company responsible for the video game Fortnite. They agreed to pay $245 million to settle FTC charges related to in-game purchases. The FTC is using that money to provide refunds to eligible Fortnite players. And it kind of makes me think. So it's all part of like the what is it called? The microtransactions, or there's some terminology for that, where you in-game purchases. Does anybody know what I'm talking about here? Or my Thomas has to know what I'm talking about. So
yeah, I do.
Nope.
So there are, anyway, so there being some kind of lawsuit. I don't know what triggered it, but do you think things like this are a bad thing, a bad event for gaming in general, or do you believe that Epic Games has been negligent on how they handle microtransactions?
I've got a opinion about this. I think microtransactions do need to be reined in as far as gaming is concerned, because a lot of times you don't get what you pay for, and a lot of times a lot of gaming companies like to take that stuff away from you after a certain period of time, or take down servers. I remember Need for Speed World, where I had bought a ton of stuff, and then like a year later they shut down the servers, and then all that stuff I had bought was gone. So a lot of these gaming companies like to take things away from you, and I think that's what that was about. People were not getting what they were paying for. But I think that it's time to start reining in some of these gaming companies in what the rules should be for microtransactions and extra content if you're paying for it.
I don't. Any time that there's government involvement on some of these things, I get a little bit nervous, because usually they don't make rules that maybe would help like an independent developer, just help large corporations. Is it one of those like buyer beware? Which would fall more in line with the buyer beware rather than a making more rules.
I agree with you, but I think that it's more. I think when it comes to filing lawsuits and stuff, it's more the users trying to rein them in rather than government legislation, because the government legislation always screws you in the end. It always favors where the money is, and that's going to be the big corporations.
Sure.
But as far as filing lawsuits with the courts, I think that's a better option than asking for legislation.
Yeah, I think so.
Also, you're dealing with people that aren't experts, in gaming. They don't understand this world. If they're people that just aren't involved in gaming online or anything like that, and you're asking them to make the judgment from a law standpoint, then obviously they're going to mess it up. It's not their area of expertise.
Yeah. What about you, Sean? What are your thoughts on these microtransactions and maybe bad behavior?
Yeah. So, I mean, it used to be that you would buy a game and you might get an update or two, and that was it. I mean, you would have the physical media or whatever, and that'd be your game experience, right? So, and maybe I'm dating myself by saying that, but
nope. I'm with you.
That's the era that I grew up in. That I remember buying games like that, and they would come on whatever media was relevant at the time. Some of them were actually cartridges, like that.
I don't know what this is.
But the gaming industry has kind of segued over to gaming as a service, for lack of a better term. So they are constantly pushing out updates, which may or may not be what you want. For example, there was a recent update. There was an update to I'm spacing on the name. Cyberpunk. That the 2.0 of Cyberpunk was released. And to me, the interface when they changed that was horrible. And since it's been reverted back to like the old interface of doing things, But you didn't have a choice. It was just like, here you are. It's you just get it, whether you want it or not. And with along that same term, same scope, I mean, you have the microtransactions of stuff you can buy in the games, etc. And I never got into that, and thankfully I didn't, because that can get expensive really quick, depending on how much you're into the game. So yeah, so my take is like the gaming industry has changed, and it's not necessarily for the better.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, because like I was just thinking how some of these games, like Fortnite, for instance, that's a very server heavy game. Eventually, at some point in time, the wind is going to be out of the sails of that game, and it's going to no longer be a thing or whatever. So people who've enjoyed that game in their youth, likely they're not going to be able to go back and play that game and share it with their kids. I can play Super Mario 3 with my kids just as it was when I was a kid with my kids, and they enjoy it. Mega Man 2, that's another great one from the Nintendo Entertainment System era. But like a lot of these newer games, that's not really a possibility. You can't do that because they're so server heavy, unless if someone like decides to resurrect the service, like some people are doing with the original Xbox and the Wii, where you can actually have it go to an alternate location. But then you're still dependent on somebody else. Although I would argue that a community-driven thing has more legs behind it than a corporate-driven thing. But anyway, yeah, so I think to me it's kind of like there's something that's going to be lost, some art that's going to be lost to the ether of time, essentially, and I think that's unfortunate. I'm looking at it from an artistic perspective.
Yeah, as far as server central things, there's also something called like always online DRM, where it always has to connect to the server, and that's actually a big problem with stuff that you're buying as well. You run into situations like with Darkspore, where EA just completely shut down the server. They didn't even patch out the DRM, so people who even have the physical disc can't even play it because they don't even have access to that server anymore. So that's kind of my fear with all this online DRM thing, is if the company could just take your money and then all of a sudden decide, well, we don't want you to play this anymore, and turn off the server. And that's why I like physical copies, is because of stuff like that. But even with these physical copies, they're putting that always online DRM into it.
Yeah, so I think I got a PlayStation. This is a couple years ago. I got a game for my PlayStation 4, and then I had to download like 50 gigabytes of stuff. And I'm like, well, why did I buy the DVD if I could? It's just kind of like it's almost like a placeholder, a bookmark, or a web link. Not really a game anymore, and I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, same thing with Steam copies as well. The ones that link into the Steam, it's only a part of the game, and you have to link into Steam to download the rest of it. So,
at least with Steam, you actually have the data and you can manipulate the data. It's on your drive. Yeah. You can back it up and use it. And they promised that it would be if
always
they
like that,
yeah. So I mean, they could break the promise, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. But Valve really Valve has a good track record of keeping their promises. Really. Yeah.
What is that? Oh, we got Nintendo 64 cartridge there. Yeah, that's awesome. I don't have very many of those. That's a little too new for me. PlayStation 2. Yeah. What was that? Crazy Taxi? Oh, that's a good one. I remember playing that in the arcade. Anybody here remember arcades? SimCity. I never played SimCity 4. Nice. It's nice that Swift is an old man like me.
I was trying to look for. I was gonna go a little earlier. I'll see what I can do, because I still have my Super Nintendo from 1992. So
that's awesome.
Hey, I remember those times. In fact, when they was doing, I remember going online, they were actually doing It was like a future view of the Dreamcast, like when they were the concept images of the Dreamcast, and that's like it seems like forever ago. But these were what was really popular at a certain time, and for a long time they were. You know?
The Dreamcast lived a very short life, and that's unfortunate because I love
Very,
that
very
system.
unfortunate.
I was
Considering
like, I love that system. I have about 100 games for the Dreamcast. I'm like, man, they could have had such a good thing, but yeah, it was very, very short.
it had so much potential, and it's not even funny what they could have done with that system. I have a cousin that still has one to this day. He probably still plays it.
I have it, and I still play it too. I have one.
You got Crazy Taxi?
Yeah, I even upgraded the drive in it from that variable drive to a modern drive. It was awesome.
That's nice.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I thought that was just an interesting article. Like, it was an article. It's actually I got an email from the FTC on that one, so it was an interesting read. And I had I've had not my kids, but somebody else use my Fortnite account and buy a bunch of things, and that was kind of a pain in the tuchus. So anyway, so I thought that was cool. Games are always a fun conversation, entertainment. It's an art form, and I think it should be preserved. And I think we're kind of in a bad spot right now in some ways.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree.
I have one more topic that I think, unless someone has something else that they want to share, I have one more topic. So there was an interesting discussion in the Telegram today that kind of got me all heated underneath the collar. It was someone made the very bold statement that Wayland is a failed experiment, and so it got me to thinking, because some people can use it and some people can't. I exclusively use it on my laptops because I can't use X. So if Wayland went away, I'd be in a bad position. So then I guess the question that comes to my mind is, when should something just be abandoned and when should it be continued?
I think my personal take on that is that the thing can be abandoned whenever the new thing can cover a large percentage of the day-to-day use cases, and understanding that the corner cases will take longer to address. I think that, to say conclusively one way or the other that either, we should just forego X and go boldly into the Wayland future, or to say that Wayland's not ready and to not use it, both of those are wrong. Mm-hmm. And so, unfortunately, we are sort of stuck in the middle, and we've been stuck in the middle for a really long time. And I can see that, understand why there's frustration around this issue. There are a lot of advantages to running Wayland, and those advantages are particularly advantageous for certain people. Like Nate, you brought up some really specific things about monitors and fractional scaling and variable refresh rates and FreeSync and lots of stuff around those display technologies that has zero impact on my use of a computer. So I'm not saying that means that I don't think that what you're enjoying by using Wayland is any less important. I'm just using that as a way to demonstrate that in a lot of ways, this is it's potentially situational. And again, back to my original statement of it, we can't just say that one is either superior to the other or one is ready or not ready. I do agree that we need to have distros like Fedora and anyone else who wants to jump on board really pushing and saying, no, we can never get to the Fedora, to the Wayland future if folks don't actually use it. So we need to start pushing on that. completely respect that. But I do have a genuine sort of reluctance around things like, let's say, the GNOME project. If they were to decide, well, we don't want to support an X session anymore, so we're just going to, stop supporting it and move forward. And anyone that's left behind, well, oh well, get a new computer or whatever the solution might be. So I think if there was an easy answer, we wouldn't have been stringing this along for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
So, but I'm genuinely curious to hear what other people say, because the positive thing that I've heard recently is that many more people are willing to work with Wayland and put in the effort of not only maybe logging, their issues, which is going to be helpful, but also learning new ways of doing things that they maybe would have been reluctant to do previously. So just having the conversation seems to have spurred some amount of momentum, which is good.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point there. Like, I think I don't like being forced to do anything. Number one, I think I want to go willingly to whatever it is. So being forced to use Pulse Audio was annoying, but once it got to the point when it was really good, it was great. I think being forced to Wayland, I wouldn't be happy about, but in a way, my hardware is kind of forcing me to use Wayland and adopt Wayland because it's just not usable. Well, it wasn't really very well usable. It was just a rough experience on X with like the refresh not being right on the high DPI screen and things like that. So it was really kind of painful to use. So, but then there's that transition period, like August. I've been basically using Wayland regularly on my laptop since August, and like things are a little bit squirrely in Wayland too, and things aren't perfect, but they're better than they are in X. So, but yeah, being forced is not cool. Sean.
Yeah, so there are definitely use cases for both X11 and Wayland. It kind of depends on what your workflow is, what your environment is. If you're heavy into standalone window managers, you're probably still going to be using X over Wayland. I mean, there are Wayland window or compositors out there, to use the right term, that you can use as standalones. But for the most part, they seem a little fringe at this point, as far as adoption. It really depends on what you're doing. So what are you doing that one technology can do that the other can't? I mean, like I said before, I'm using Cinnamon, and that's currently on X11, and I'm fine with that. And from a day-to-day perspective, you probably really won't, if everything's working, everything's working. You're not going to worry about what, if it's X11 over Wayland. So, I think while X11 will eventually go away, it's not going to go away tomorrow.
No.
It's not going to go away next year. It might go away in 10 years. It might go away in 15 years, but there's it'll be a slow transition to Wayland only. If that's what we eventually use and nothing else gets in the way.
I kind of think actually more or less, I think things in X, because of the X Wayland and that, although slow and a bit ropey right now, it has made some, as a stopgap, has actually made a lot of progress. I think it's possible, maybe not, maybe it's just, but it seems like it's possible that it might just absorb the different functions of X11 over time, and eventually it's just going to be X11 will basically be rewritten into X12, which is Wayland.
You have to assume, like, if Wayland is strong enough and covers enough use cases, why would you choose to use X11? There would really be no reason. So I think some of the hesitation and reluctance is out of either a bad experience, which I've had just several. I'm not writing it off. I know it's a work in progress, but The day that I can just do the things that I need to do and there's no conflict, I don't care which one I use. I just want to use the one that works. That's it. You know?
And I think that's how I'd view basically all the technologies that's keeping my desktop running. I don't really care. I just want to be able to get from point A to point B and do it in such a way that I'm happy to use my technology. It doesn't frustrate me, I guess.
Yeah.
Rudra.
Oh, yep. So, to be honest, the thing about Wayland is that it depends on the desktop environment you're talking about. So if we come to GNOME, for example, they do not support the layer shell protocols in quite a few routers. So forgive me if I'm wrong, but I had a quick glance at the merge requests, to drop the X11 session, some GNOME sessions. So the problem with GNOME is, these protocols, they only implement the core Wayland protocols, so you can't have things like panels and all of that. So, when you compare it to KDE Plasma, you compare it to Plasma and all the other desktop environments that do support Wayland, most of them, and even Sway and other winter managers, they have support for all of these protocols. So you can have things like panels and all of those that you would on X11, so independent clients that can do all of that. But GNOME, has they do not have any plans to support these, and they outside rejected these. There were a few merge requests for this, and I think there was a merge request, but I remember them just rejecting it. So yeah, that's a problem because it depends on the desktop environment you're talking about. So yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah, and I would imagine that you, because you sort of float in between all of those different desktop environments, that you're seeing differing and disparate approaches to, how do we implement Wayland? And it's unfortunate that there has to be such a wide different, it makes it difficult to sort of just say, like, here is Wayland, this is what it is, and this is how we're going to move forward with it, whenever everybody, the premise of Wayland is this is all we do, and all this other stuff that X used to do, you do now. And so that leaves a lot of work on their plate, which on one hand is probably the better way to go about it long term, for security, for all of the different reasons that X is fundamentally a less capable, potentially less ideal system, let's say, than Wayland. But yeah, it's a case by case basis at this point. I hear literally on a daily basis, like, well, this app just doesn't work under Wayland. And it's going to take the developers. I think OBS was the last one someone was complaining about, where, OBS, just some portion of it at least wasn't working properly. And it's squarely on OBS's plate to fix that for it to work under Wayland. And
I think that the what they did with Pipewire and the way they can pipe things or plumb things is literally what actually has made Wayland possible. I think that until...
So you think like X Wayland or something like that is a better...
No, I think that...
The bridges.
Sorry. X Wayland can bridge some of the old methods with the new methods, but the Pipewire way of creating these, like...
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes.
So like, because Pipewire is more than just...
The transport of... Yes.
Right. So Pipewire opens up a whole new world of like functionality and capability that did not exist before.
Right.
So like, I think that Wayland couldn't really be utilized fully until Pipewire was there to actually to allow the different things to be piped around. While because Wayland was more like a description of how to do things, not necessarily the way to execute it. That they want to keep it more broad, good, bad, or otherwise. That's what they did. And so I think that having the Pipewire there so you can do really cool things now that you've not been able to do before, with like virtual screens and everything else. It's actually super, super cool with Pipewire, with Wayland. So I guess someone just actually, who's at Fuse Team, he said something like, meanwhile X is written for how computers used to work 30 years ago. and that's very true. And so I think we've like had to like, you know, patch and make work and patch and do all these different things to get all these different functionalities out of X, while Wayland kind of streamlines that entire process. And so it should actually reduce latency and a bunch of other things with our graphics display as it's implemented correctly. And I think that's just it just takes time. I think, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day. I'm sure you've heard that before, right? And maybe had Wayland been more top down, enforcing certain things, that might have sped up the process.
Yeah.
But maybe that's okay.
But it probably would have been premature as well, though. Don't you think? Like, things happen in the time that it takes for them to happen, right? You can try to force something to happen. Like, why is it that this year, seemingly, and at least from my perspective, that it's become front and center? And the fact that, again, not just that, you know, there's been a push, a concerted effort on the part of both X and Wayland developers to get us off of X for a long time now.
They're the same developers.
Well, of course, but that's what I'm saying is, like, they've been pushing, and yet everybody was like, yeah, whatever. And now all of a sudden it's like, now is the time that people are starting to listen and consider, like, well, what would I need to do? I guess, you know, and this is my own ignorance. I need to understand a little better. When I think about Wayland, I think about the things that I can't do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's maybe a mindset issue. And I'm not trying to be like woo woo, you know, mind over matter kind of thing. I'm just saying, like, that's how I look at it. When I try Wayland, I think the things that stick out to me are the things that I can't do, not the things that maybe are better. And maybe there are lots of things that are better that I'm not seeing and focusing on that would motivate me to take care of those likely fewer things that I can't do. But something is causing this traction right now, and we should go with it.
Critical mass, I think, is probably what it is. Is it when things get like, you know, when a lot of the bugs are worked out, a lot of issues are worked out. I mean, so I tried using Wayland. I actually used Wayland for quite a while in 2021, and it didn't. I had too many issues with it, and I did it again early this year. Had a lot of issues. Like, things got worse after some time, and I had to try it because of the new hardware. And now things seem to have really been worked out as far as like the way they're piping video and everything else seems to actually really be working quite well. And so I think it's good now. I mean, I'm actually forced to, because of hardware, use it. But anyway, so I've actually been very happy with it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
the problem with sorry, yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. No,
yeah,
please.
The issue with Wayland is we just got to remember it's a protocol at its core, so it is kind of difficult for software, you know, to support different Wayland compositors, because you need to have different code for multi-based compositors like, you know, Gano and all of those, and you've got to have different implementations for Sway and all the others, based compositors and KDE and all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So that is some major issues. So, you know, we can't just categorize Wayland in general, because that's one major thing. So, for example, I use a piece of software, Input Leap, if you've heard of it. You know, it's a fork of Synology.
Okay.
So, you know, just for sharing the keyboard and mouse between multiple computers.
Okay.
So, I remember one of the main issues, you know, when porting it to Wayland being, you know, having to support multiple compositors, because they simply did not have the resources for that, or something along those lines, to have issues with that. So that's something that's holding back in terms of developers, you know, from switching over and supporting Wayland compositors. So that's my 2 cents.
I think a lot of it, the work was done there in the toolkits as well. So when, you know, the Qt and GTK toolkits actually targeting, or maybe not.
Yeah. I mean, it's fine for regular. Yeah, it's fine for regular stuff, you know, for basic apps, you know. That use GTK and Qt, but if you want to do anything remotely advanced, you know, if you you know, sort of like Input Leap or OBS, it requires a lot of effort, you know, to get it working.
Right.
Yeah.
Penguin or Alan?
I'll be nice, I promise. But
that's not a requirement.
But I'll be nice. But the problems that a lot of people have with Wayland is because of the decentralized nature of the compositors, And some programs will work perfectly with like GNOME or KDE because they have great implementations. But then when you switch to something like Sway, which has its own other display server attached to it, and that's where I run into problems. Is I want to use Sway in a lot of things, and like OBS, when you try and capture certain windows, especially like X-based windows, it'll have just a big black square on it because Wayland somehow OBS cannot somehow read that window. I don't know exactly what's going on there. And a lot of the issues also a lot of people have is with NVIDIA these days. NVIDIA has done a lot of work to support Wayland, but it still quite isn't there yet. Even with the newer cards. And I'm one of those edge cases where my hardware simply will never be compatible with Wayland unless if I'm using the open source Nouveau driver. Because I am using an NVS 4200M, and that's a 12-year-old card that's using driver 390 right now. And 390 is never going to see Wayland support because 390 just actually, I think, just went out of support for security about 6 months ago. So there are certain other things. I think that, and my main concern is like with GNOME considering eliminating the X session and stuff. I think it's a little soon for that. Because there are so many other cases where X is still required. And if you sunset the X system, especially with a mainline project like GNOME that a lot of people pull from, like Budgie and Cinnamon, if you're pulling that X session, you're going to mess up those other projects that depend on the X session that are forks of GNOME right now, because Budgie and Cinnamon have not completed their Wayland implementations yet.
I think at some point you're just going to have to say, and maybe this is how we get past this. There is such a thing as a long-term support release for a reason. And if your use case works on a 2204 or a upcoming 2404 or whatever, then you have a path forward for at least a certain amount of time. And even if GNOME took out X in their next release, it doesn't undo what already exists. And so there's still ground to stand on. It's not like literally, they're pulling the rug out from under you. It does make it problematic on moving forward. You're right, that because GNOME is foundational for so many other projects. But again, it's like if we don't force this a little bit, I feel like we're just going to perpetually stay in this gray area. And again, there's no absolutism here. There's no one right answer. But I think that all of these technical challenges are approachable and solvable. Look how much has been accomplished in such a short amount. You had all these years of very little happening because there wasn't a lot of effort or attention or focus or really a real reason for any kind of urgency around it. And all of a sudden, when people really turn their eyes towards something, it's incredible how fast solutions appear. It just takes that collective will for people to just say, we need to do this now.
Yeah.
And I think that pushes us, and something has shifted and we're in that direction now. I think.
Yeah.
And maybe the solution is if GNOME wants to pull that for certain versions, perhaps maybe they need to create a long-term support release for GNOME that doesn't pull the X system, so that there's something for the other projects while they're getting their Wayland implementations ready to pull from.
So I think, to be fair,
that might be the solution.
Yeah.
To be fair,
by the way,
GNOME does what GNOME wants to do. That's just the way that project works. So GNOME they set sail in a direction, and they kind of don't really care what anybody else thinks, and that's actually part of the charm of GNOME. Is
Yes,
it's good and it's bad depending on who you are and where you are, how much of the stack you use, and so, that being said, GNOME developers are going to do what GNOME developers want to do, because whatever you want to think, I think Linus Torvalds said it pretty clearly. He says everybody in the open source community is selfish. They're all trying to satisfy within reason. They're all trying to satisfy a certain selfish need, and it just happens to be that a lot of our selfish needs are the same, and so we work together to all satisfy our own selfish needs. Now, some people are probably more, not selfish, because that's not an absolute, but largely speaking, there is a reason why. I mean, Apple doesn't develop their own display server out of the goodness of their heart. They do these things because there's a financial benefit to it. There's a selfish motivation in there. And I'm not saying selfish is bad. It can be. So, no one wants to accomplish a task, and they're going to do it, and they want to make it as easy as possible. I find GNOME extremely frustrating to use because they've taken away things that are important to me to use a desktop, so I just don't use it. And if they want to go down that path, that's fine, because they have to express a creative itch regardless, and so they should do what they need to do. I'm sorry, Rudra, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sure. By the way, coming to what Penguin said, about the NVIDIA GPU, but by the way, about other desktop environments that depend on GNOME or that for folks in GNOME, it shouldn't really be an issue for for Cinnamon, for example, since they use their own window manager. And then they have the fork of Matter, which is window manager GNOME uses. It's called Muffin, I think. And then as for Budgie, Budgie too has their own fork, but I don't think they have the manpower. They have the manpower to maintain it, since they used to use Matter as well. But they do have plans to switch over, and they have plans to use WL Zoots now. So about NVIDIA GPUs, by the way, it shouldn't really be an issue for people using new GPUs. Those that came out in the last 6-7 years. Outside of some issues, related to suspension, all of that. So there was a really annoying bug, that will result in a lot of artifacting and missing elements, missing UI elements, and all of that when you suspend your computer if you were using an NVIDIA GPU or with Wayland. So there are workarounds on all of that. But it shouldn't be that big of an issue for NVIDIA users. Oh, and by the way, as for OBS, one major thing is some pieces of software just decide to use X11 for some reason. They use X-Wayland, or they use the X-Wayland server. So about Windows being blank, that stems from trying to screen capture the X-Wayland server, and there isn't anything really on there. It's just going to be a blank canvas, so that is why it's black. So, yep, just wanted to
But they've implemented all the pipewire methods of screen grabbing, so it's a non-issue at this point.
It's a non-issue now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Which is why I want to go back to it, because I feel like I have an opinion formed over the last 10 years of let's check this, and each time not having it be ready, and that's coloring my thought about it. I mean, just the word Wayland. I mean, everybody, it's one of those words that, like, as soon as you hear it, you have an opinion. Like, there's something in your mind about what that means, which, and maybe you don't. Maybe I'm weird like that, but it's one of those, like, when I think about the Linux ecosystem, especially desktop and graphical Linux, like, it is so foundational and fundamental to the conversation we've been having for, and all of the things that we've been trying to do around fractional scaling and multiple monitors and, proprietary graphic GPU drivers and on and on and on, all these problems that have been trying to be fixed and corrected. And, none of that can move forward without these other things being addressed. So anyway, Seeker, are you raising your hand? Oh, well, you did this. Anyway. What do you guys think with the the distro developers, Ben and Thomas? What do you guys think about Wayland, and what are your plans for dealing with that?
So StrawPoll has been looking at trying to move to Wayland for a couple of years now. For those who don't know, we use XFCE as our desktop environment. And XFCE has been one of the desktop environments that have been really dragging their heels. Largely, from what I understand, the applications are working just fine in Wayland. The issue at this point seems to be the window manager, which is XFWM4. That does not have any sort of Wayland support, period. And from what I understand, they're going to have to do a complete rewrite from the ground up.
Oh, wow.
Now, the nice thing about XFCE is you can actually use a different window manager. However, the problem with this is the integration with the system settings and how XFCE stores its settings and things like that. It would have to be completely overhauled to accommodate a different window manager. As anybody who uses XFCE with i3 or OpenBox or Mutter or anything like that will tell you, it may work, but it doesn't work nearly as well as using XFCE's sanctioned window manager. So we've been looking at potentially changing desktop environment next release.
Oh, okay.
We don't want to. I would rather keep using XFCE and use Wayland, but this is a change that needs to be done. And literally, we don't have a choice because it doesn't work otherwise. We want something that's very configurable and very lightweight. So my mind immediately goes not null. It's still very heavy from my experience. It's not as heavy as it was, but null is still very heavy and it's not nearly as configurable as we want. I've tried Mate, but Mate's Wayland support, last I checked, was very flaky and incomplete. LXQT is okay, but it's, again, not as configurable as I want. Although it is very lightweight, LXDE is essentially dead and replaced as LXQT replaced it. That leaves us one option, KDE, which I've actually been using KDE with Wayland on and off because my Pinebook, by default, if I'm not mistaken, the version of Manjaro it ships with is using KDE and it's using Wayland out of the box. And it actually works okay. It crashes occasionally, but like it comes right back up. And actually, I had an issue with a login loop with XFCE the other day. So right now, I am begrudgingly using KDE so I can get more familiar with it so I can support it. I can see you grinning over there, Nate. And I have to try Wayland on my desktop with KDE. So I have an NVIDIA graphics card, and it totally works. However, it is extremely laggy. Like it'll take a couple minutes in order for it to go from the login screen to functioning desktop. And then I'll click on the little application menu icon where the start menu would be in Windows, and it takes a couple seconds for that to come up. Once you open up a game, however, it works perfectly fine. Games perform perfectly. There's no hitching, there's no stuttering, there's no lag. It's great. It's just on the desktop. And until that gets fixed, I don't feel comfortable shipping Wayland, but I can see that happening sooner rather than later. It is very likely that what will happen is either A, StrawPoll for the next release ships Plasma, but it boots into KDE Plasma using X11 by default, but you have the option to use Wayland if you so choose, because it's literally just one extra package. Or we stick with XFCE and we do a mid-cycle refresh, and ship a new version of JavaOS that uses Wayland once Wayland becomes more performant on NVIDIA. So that's kind of the sort of spot we're in right now. Thankfully, all the applications that we've developed that use GTK looks fine on Qt, and especially our system installation utility, which uses a GTK front end. I explicitly designed it with this possibility in mind. So I'm able to go back and create a new front end in Qt and nothing breaks. It is literally just a new front end, and I can have it be different front end packages and a back end package at a time. It's literally just, at this point, Wayland's not performant enough on NVIDIA on the desktop itself. Games are great. It's just, it just ain't quite there yet. It's getting close. I can see it on the horizon. We just ain't there yet.
So I do daily type Plasma with Wayland on my Ubuntu setup. The issues you mentioned, I haven't encountered any of them, to be honest, because from what I know, the point devices used to they do not have support for GPU accelerated tuning acceleration. From what I know, so because Plasma Wayland just loads in a second, it takes lesser time than the X11 session to load. So I haven't encountered any of those issues, to be honest. It's perfectly stable with an NVIDIA GPU from with a 3070. It's perfectly fine. So, so
I'm running a 2080 and I'm having these huge lag issues. I don't see why I would, but it could be down to we're running different versions of KDE, honestly. Because the version of JavaOS that I'm running, I'm not running a development version. I'm running the latest stable, so we're based off of Ubuntu 22.04. So it might be the KDE I'm pulling down is a little bit older. The Wayland libraries I'm using maybe a little bit older.
You are. I was going to say that version of KDE is almost 2 years old. So,
yeah, not surprised.
And KDE, as far as Wayland support, has grown in leaps and bounds.
Oh, I'm sure.
So I would say the problem is your KDE version, and probably not NVIDIA, even though NVIDIA still has issues. But I would say more your problem is with the current version of KDE that you have.
Yeah, because 5.27, 5.27 is much better in terms of Wayland support. It's a lot more stable. So, I mean, you might want to give it a try.
Yeah, I just got to figure out how I want to go about trying out that new version. Because the current development version of JavaOS that I'm working on, I believe is currently it's not based on Mantic, it's based on Lunar. So, it's actually based on 2404. So it's very, very bleeding edge right now. It should already be able to boot, because thanks to several years of iteration, we've gotten to the point where it's at least reliable to build an ISO with a new base. But I'll just have to try it and see.
Yeah, because would you be switching to 24.4 for the next release? Because then, I mean, Plasma would be a great choice, to be honest, since just for Wayland. And just mention that. So,
Thomas, my suggestion is if you're going to try a newer version of KDE, just pull down a version of Ubuntu, like the brand new version of Ubuntu. That'd probably be the best way to do it.
I could totally do that. My only issue then would be NVIDIA drivers, because it's not in the ISO. Because I need to make sure this works all the way through as if it was an installed system. I need to try this both like on NVIDIA without the NVIDIA drivers as if this is a live system. I need to try this on NVIDIA with the NVIDIA drivers as if this is an installed system. and I need to try this on something like an AMD or Intel GPU, because that's going to behave the same whether it's live or installed. I just need to make sure it works on all of these in order to be.
Yep. So we are rapidly running out of time, and I love this conversation. This is like what I love about OpenSUSE. What I love about Linux Saloon. So I want to thank you. That was, I think, Thomas. It's nice to have you and talking about your problems, because we got other people who are like Rudra, who's like a brilliant scientist that he can help you computer out your work. Anyway, so I think new version of KDE for you or Plasma would probably help you out. But we do have to move on. So thank you very much. I love open mic nights because it's just such a free-flowing form of conversation, and I think that these are my favorites. That and News Flight, I like that too. So some real quick housekeeping. If you have any suggestions, please send them to suggestions@linuxsaloon.com. I appreciate emails; they are the best. And I think we need to move back to email or snail mail for things. So I'll give you my address too. You can PO box. I'm kidding, I don't have one for you. But if you have any distribution suggestions or application suggestions, poll ideas, anything, send them to suggestions@linuxsaloon.com, or you can tag Eris or myself or somebody that you see here regularly on the in Telegram or Discord or wherever, or Twix or Mastodon and so forth. There's Linux Saloon calendar. I still got to fix some things with the new Linux Saloon site, so we'll get there. So also we have to talk about for next week. We have to do a distribution, and so we have Rudra here. Now, did you release a new Ubuntu Unity recently?
Just lost this. Yeah.
All right. So I don't know, because we had Rudra here. It'd be kind of cool if maybe we tried out the latest Ubuntu Unity, but I think that
I second that.
But I think also if you just don't want to do Unity for some odd reason, that's cool. Do another version of Ubuntu. I would like to talk about Ubuntu in general next week as well, but I really want to focus more on the Unity version, if at all possible. So if anyone has any heartburn about that, let me know. Okay, thanks. Now we can move on. So next week,
I love Ubuntu Unity.
I think we should give
I love it too, and I second this idea, Nate.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So I think I didn't hear any disagreements. All opposed say nay. Okay, no nays. All right. So
hold a second, Nate. I just want to tell you guys, after this episode, I'm going to download Rudra's latest ISO and shove it on this laptop and my next one next to me.
Beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll get to the community free pour. Ben, I don't have a whole lot of time, but I did.
I'll make this as quick as I can.
I wanted to absolutely give you time to talk, because Rudra is probably going to be a great resource for you.
And I actually have a question for him during my portion of the show.
Well, it's free pour now, so go ahead at it. So Ben.
Okay. Well, before I get to my question to my buddy Rudra here, who told me he is downloading my ISO. Thank you for that, good sir. Now, brief update. We are adding a Plymouth theme next ISO. We are going to have a Mate build as well. And we are also adding some Optimus tools as well, which I did sort out. So that's going to be coming in the next version. And pretty much just minor tweaks here and there. And we're going to be having a programs refresh from Seeker, a couple of things like that, so we're just going to be doing routinely updates, stuff like that. And also, the question for you, Rudra, is how do you build your Unity ISOs? What tool do you use? Things like that, because I want to know, because in the upcoming ISO of StormOS, I don't know which version, but we are going to be doing an XFCE Ubuntu edition as well. So I wanted to ask you, good sir, how I can best go about making an Ubuntu spin, because I don't know what the heck tool you are using, but I just wanted to ask, because I've gone around digging for something similar to Remaster Sys or whatever, because as well as I do, because that project is dead in the water. And I wanted to ask, how you're going about it, because I tried like Cubic and a whole bunch of stuff. I can't find anything to help me get this Ubuntu ISO off the ground. So I figured, you've built Ubuntu ISOs, maybe best just to ask you.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Master System Cubic. I mean, even if the Master System was alive, interesting.
It wouldn't work too well.
It wouldn't work too well. You do not want to have to image a running system built in ISO. So right now,
I figured, maybe you could shed some light on this because, I don't know what the heck you guys are using over at Ubuntu Unity, but I figured maybe you could give me some suggestions or some help to sort of figure out a tool that I could use because I don't want to have to download Pingui Builder or something that's just based on remaster sys because that's never going to keep up with the times and all that stuff. And with the constant Ubuntu changes, I don't want to use something that's hella deprecated. You know what I'm saying?
You know what? So Ubuntu Unity is a flavor now. So we now use Ubuntu's infrastructure, but before this, before the 22.10 release, and even for 22.10, when we weren't certain about whether we would become a flavor, we had our own builder. It was named the Ubuntu Remix Builder. So I also had plans to, set up a website that would allow you to build your own ISO with a set of packages and all of that.
Oh, that would be great.
It would just
how
email
soon
you
do you
the
think
answer.
you'll have said website with said tool available?
Yeah. So so I had built a small tool builder that was used by Ubuntu Cinnamon, Ubuntu Unity, and many other distros. So I built a builder, the Ubuntu Remix.
Well, I am in your all's Telegram, so what I'll do is after the show, can I ping you and that sort of thing?
Sure, yeah.
All right, cool. Well, I'll chat you on Telegram about this idea after the show. And we'll go from there.
Beautiful. Linux Saloon bringing people together. That's a wonderful thing.
Hell yeah. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks much. And hope you guys enjoyed that little update.
Yep. Awesome. All right. Well, it is that time for last call.
Show closing, yeah.
So don't start singing closing time. I don't want to get a content strike.
No.
Eric, you are on a podcast called Distro Hoppers Digest. And I know if you're still there, I just see your smiley face. We can come back to you. Steve's very own. From what I understand, he's doing a live stream tomorrow. If at 9 a.m. Eastern, no, 9:15 Eastern or 8:15 Eastern, 8:15 Central. So if you're gonna catch Steve tomorrow, he may have that. Linux User Space. They're doing their next show is the Common Desktop Environment History. They'll be released on Monday the 16th. Now, spoiler, so go ahead and mute if you don't want any spoilers. All right, you're muted. Great. Their next history will be on XFCE. But the next live stream is pinned for Tuesday the 17th, and then it'll be a topics episode. I'm on a podcast called...
excited.
Good. I'm on a podcast called Linux Out Loud. We talked about our interests last week, or just things that we're working on. So it's kind of one of those fun, easy to do episodes, and we all learn a little something. Are you back, Eric? Yes, no, maybe not. Well, he has a podcast called Distro Hoppers Digest, so check that out. I think episode 46 is next. Maybe it's 47. I don't know. He could be working on something really exciting, and we just won't know about it until later. I have a website called keyboardlay.com. I've done a couple articles lately. One is on Wayland display server on OpenSUSE Tumbleweed, and my successes with it, with a couple of minor issues that I do have. And then also, I discovered today, or maybe it was yesterday, that Electron apps are not loading correctly. And so I did file a bug report on that, and also there's a workaround, is getting Electron apps properly displaying once again. This has something to do with GPU acceleration issues, so either disabling it or clearing out cache can be successful. But so I did a couple articles there. Eventually they'll get it fixed. Not a big deal. It's a minor thing. Affected 2 applications. Linux Saloon is part of the Tux Digital Network, so check out more great shows at tuxdigital.com. I want to thank you all for your support, however you do it. Being a part of the conversation in both the Zoom meeting as well as YouTube stream, and everyone for watching the show after the fact. I want to thank everyone involved for making the Linux and open source tools possible for us to not only have this conversation, but also to have fun and enjoy our technology. Linux truly puts personal back in a personal computer. Thank you for stopping by. Be sure to tip your developers, and please remember to Linux responsibly. Until next time, see yas.
Good night, everybody.